Welcome to the Truth About Employed Physicians podcast, a weekly show where we take you behind the scenes of the professional healthcare industry and reveal the little-known methods highly successful physicians, doctors, and professionals are executing right now to maximize their income, reduce their financial liabilities, and most importantly, regain the freedom to live their lives on their terms. Subscribe to the Truth About Employed Physicians podcast today so you don't miss a single episode of this highly valuable information from our host, a veteran physician with more than 20 years in practice and counting. Now, your host, Dr. Incorporated.
Afternoon, everybody. This is Dr. Incorporated, bringing you the next installment of The Truth About Employed Physicians. I'm excited to have a couple of young medical students with me today. They're actually in their third, almost fourth year, that are picking up a conversation that we've been having recently about just little tips and tricks that young physicians need to kind of keep in mind as they prepare for really entering in as attending physicians. It's all part of a book that I'm working on that'll be released a little bit later this summer, I hope, for young physicians. But we're going to be covering a subject matter today that's one near and dear to everybody's heart in medicine, especially if you're a student. It's debt. And so before we get started with that, I just want to say a big thank you to all you attending physicians out there, because you're working hard. And this is a Friday. We're heading into a weekend. And I know sometimes, man, at the end of a long, hard week in medicine, you're just glad to get home. And you're just ready to kind of be off call and to be with your family, and it's because you've worked hard. You've poured yourself into those patients, and you poured yourself into that medical community, and I want to thank you for that. There's a lot of people whose lives have been changed because of the work that you've done. So thank you, physicians, for the work you're doing. Thank you, students, for the work you're doing to learn and be educated. Thank you, residents, for what you're doing in this process as well. So we all play a big part in this thing. So today I want to just do a little intro again, and so let's start by introducing Ian. So Ian, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so like I said, my name's Ian. I'm from Avon, Indiana, which is right outside of Indianapolis. My background is my mom is a nurse, my dad is an engineer,
okay.
And so that was pretty much my initial exposure to medicine was through my mom, but no doctors in my family. Growing up, I had some vague interest in science, but I liked to play sports. I liked art. I come from a musical family,
okay.
So I did a lot of stuff like that. When I was deciding on a career path, I was involved with a lot of time spending at the homeless clinic, the homeless shelter in my college town.
Okay.
And I loved the opportunity to get to talk to people there. I found that I enjoyed the conversations, and I found that they were like a people group that was just not understood well, and they weren't being reached out to well as far as healthcare. And so I kind of made the choice to go into medicine from there.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, 3 years in, I'm debating between emergency medicine and surgery, trying to decide a lot of things based on what's the lifestyle I want for myself and for future family.
Yeah, that's good. And speaking of future family, you're married, right?
Yeah, I'm married. My wife, Hannah, we've been married for about 4 years now.
Okay.
We just got a puppy, so family's growing.
Yeah, no, that's the first step, right?
That's what they
That's
say.
how it works. All right. And Hannah, she works, she goes to school.
Yeah, so she is currently doing a PhD at Marquette. So for the past 3 years, we've been living separately, doing our programs, and now this next month we'll be coming back together, living together for the first time.
Thank you, Lord.
I know. It'll be amazing.
Wow. Okay.
So when we got into our programs, we made the collective decision that we wanted on each other's dreams.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how it went. And so
good.
now she'll be starting dissertation, and I'll be starting my 4th year, and so we'll be able to be together.
Yeah, boy, I tell you what, people in medicine and going through medical training are very used to delayed gratification, right, as a thing. But that's the ultimate. When 3 years of marriage, so to speak, living separately, that's tough. Right? So it's going to feel really good to be together.
Absolutely.
Or maybe you're going to have to relearn the relationship all over again, a little bit, learning to live together. That'd be interesting. Have to have you on one of our other podcasts, talk more about that. It's very interesting. So we have with you, though, John. So John, you those of you who have tuned in before, listened to us, or seen our vlog, have familiar with John. He's been on a few of them recently, but if you're new, so maybe John, introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm John, and I'm a medical student at Indiana University School of Medicine, and I'm planning to go into orthopedic surgery, and grew up in a rural community in Indiana, and I'm also married. My wife is an accountant, and she works for a big national accounting firm, RSM, and she's in the midst of tax season right now, so she's working like 80 hours a week, and
she may as well be getting a degree at Marquette.
It may as well be getting a degree. Yeah, it actually fits in perfectly with the busyness of medical school. Now we're both just as busy as each other, so I don't feel guilty about having to study and do other things all the time. So.
And you and Ian are classmates, though, right?
Yeah, Ian and I are classmates, and met each other in our first year, and so yeah.
Okay. It's always nice to have a good study partner, a good friend, somebody you can kind of go through the trenches together with, and it sounds like that's been an important part for both of you. And I've got some dear friends that I went through medical school with as well. And just so if you didn't know, as a listener, John is my son, and so the kind of the heart of what we've been talking about in the book that I'm writing, but also in this podcast series, has kind of been me wanting to share some of the things that I've learned, or at least some of the topics that I know are really critical to the young physicians that I think I can share some insights on, but I also think you can share some insights into that journey as well. And it's a two-way street. I don't have all the answers, but I certainly know where some of those big peaks and valleys are going to be for you as you go through this process. And I love medicine. I love being a doctor. And what I want more than anything for my friends who are younger physicians is I want you to have the same joy that I have in being a doctor, you know. And so that's kind of the spirit of this thing, is kind of, hey, what can we do together to make sure that, you know, we meet the mark with what your goal is, you know, like you're trying to decide between surgery and emergency medicine. Well, there's lifestyle involved in that, but there's just also kind of that sense of purpose and that sense of, at the end of the day, do you feel like you've done all that the Almighty's called you to do, sort of thing, right? Yeah. And so this is part of that conversation that we're having. But today we're talking about debt. Oh, our dear friend, debt. You know, let me start by saying when I went to medical school, I was married as well, just like you guys. Where I got married in the middle of my second year of medical school. My wife was a doctor of pharmacy, and fortunately, she put me through medical school. I'm very fortunate that way. So I did not end up with a lot of big debt in the process of going through medical school. Now, that was a few years ago, and so, but I don't have any of the pressures or the experiences. I know they're real, that a lot of people have going in this process. I guess I was also fortunate in undergrad to have earned scholarships that took care of my undergrad education too, fully. And so I really started out in a good position from that standpoint. So what I don't feel and have not felt in my own is what you guys currently feel. Education debt, right? And so is that something, Ian, that you and your wife have to go through? I mean, you're both students, so to speak, right?
Right. So one thing that's great about her program is, since there's a difficult job placement following a theology PhD, is that her program pays for schooling, and they will give you a stipend provided that you TA for a class. So currently we're living on her stipend, though it's it's not a lot. It's sparse.
That's lean living. Okay. So did you have to take out loans?
Yeah, absolutely.
For undergrad and grad?
So in the same boat for undergrad, I got some good scholarships through that, but my wife had to pay for school, and then also for her master's, she had to pay for that, and then I'm also paying for medical school.
So basically, you between the two of you, you've got some of these kind of growing debt loads.
Yeah, it's piled on.
Yeah. And so, how about for you, John? What do you got going?
So I was fortunate. I got some good scholarship in undergrad, so I didn't graduate with any debt from undergrad, and my wife also did not graduate with any debt from undergrad or her master's, thankfully. And so didn't come into med school with any debt, but despite my wife working as a accountant at a big firm, it's still not enough to cover the expenses of tuition at medical school on top of living expenses.
Yeah.
And so don't have to take out loans for living expenses, but we do take out some tuition loans every semester, so
Okay.
which is not a small amount of money.
No, but it sounds like, knowing that the average medical student who, wraps up their fourth year of medical school has, depends on the stat you look at, between $200,000, $300,000, not uncommon, of debt. Sounds like the two of you nicely are maybe on the lighter side of that, but still racking up some debt, right?
Yeah, I think I'll be sitting probably at the 200 mark last time I checked once I'm done.
Okay, yeah, between the two of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that's a lot. And John, I think sounds like yours going to be a little bit less, and so much like me, you're fortunate to be in that position. But I just kind of wonder though, how does that affect your psyche? Does the fact that you owe a bank or banks that much money, does that bother you?
That's a great question. And my upbringing, I think we were fairly well off, but I grew up feeling like I had to be pretty frugal all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just kind of been instilled in me. And so despite having to take out loans, I've always tried to take out the very minimum.
Mm-hmm.
And I've kind of found too that it's placed like, I don't know if an unnecessary load of stress on our backs. We're feeling like we have to check everything here and there and not take out any more than we need to. Yeah, it's tricky because since we're kind of, all of our funds come from either a stipend from school or from loans. Money is it's kind of a symbolic thing at the moment, and so it's tough to really know, like, should we be taking out more loans, because it doesn't really matter right now, and it's better to feel like a little bit weight is lifted off of our backs.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the current situation.
Okay.
So I think the first 2 years of school, we were much more on the conservative end of taking out loans. This past year, we've kind of eased back and say, hey, if we need to take out an extra $5,000, so we're not like feeling anxious for months, then I think we'll go ahead and do that.
How do you guys feel about the loans? Are they bother you and your wife?
Oh yeah, we definitely consider ourselves to be very debt averse.
Okay.
And so we've taken out as minimal loans as we can for the most part, and we plan to pay them off as soon as possible.
Gotcha.
Upon completion of medical school. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So just out of curiosity, is taking out a loan for a medical student, is it easy? Like, in other words, the institute, does your medical school say, hey, here's the guy to talk to if you need some money? Or is it the local bank that you talk to? Or is it, Guido on the street that you talk to? Where's the money how easy is it to just kind of go, hey, I'm in medical school, I need money? How does that work? Is it the government? Where is it? Where does it come from?
Yeah, we have a financial advisor who we can email requesting extra funds. And we also have to follow up with that on our accounts requesting more money. It's a pretty easy process, but at the same time, when you're doing it multiple times in a year, it kind of feels like a guilty act. You're like, oh, I'm guessing I'm going to need another $5,000.
Gotcha. All right, how about for you?
Yeah, it's easy. You just click a couple buttons and then you get the money, and it's most of them is federally funded loans.
Okay. Gotcha.
And for us being in-state tuition at a state school, it's cheaper than some other schools where you might have to access some other loan options in order to cover the costs.
Just human behavior wise, it seems to me like I hear you talking about like a sense of a break, like, oh, should I put the brakes on taking out more? But then I heard you say, but then this year we kind of said to ourselves, why make ourselves stressed in doing this? Let's just take out a little bit more. And maybe some of that little bit more was so that you could take a little getaway to, a nearby city, because, that $500 for that was kind of wrapped up in that loan, and you could do something for yourself. Is that kind of the process that it goes through?
That's absolutely the process, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And, one thing I struggle with is I feel like to some extent life is going to get more difficult as time goes on. And so this may be the freest time I have until I retire. And so I think to some extent we should be able to live freely. So yeah, that does mean taking trips.
Yeah.
We're going to take a trip to Montana, and
Good.
So that was a consideration. For sure.
Yeah, one of the premises is that I have in at least my book, and I think for medical students as a whole, is those debt loads are so large. Kind of the notion of like, what's another 5,000?
Mm-hmm.
What's another 10,000?
So you drop in the bucket.
It's nothing. I'll get to paying it off eventually. I'll make more money and we'll get it paid off. And you know what? They're making the money pretty easy for us to access. So it just feels like it's almost funny money. I can just. Do you feel like that's the case for the two of you, or do you see your peers in medical school sort of like, yep, just go to the ATM and get a little more money and whatever I need? How's that play out?
I'm not sure.
I mean, I think there are a lot of fellow classmates who take out a lot more than I would. But at the same time, yeah, I'm taking out more money for school than I've ever made, and so I mean, I truly don't have a good sense of the value of it. I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to gauge not really having a job now. It's just kind of available. I think a lot of people do maximize their loans because they, kind of know in the future they're going to have a high salary and they have the ability to pay them down. And so that extra $5,000 is worth a lot more to them now than it will be in 10 years when they're getting, way more than that every month.
Yeah. Yeah,
most likely. So.
And you're kind of over a barrel. You have to do it, right? The medical school says tuition is now $60,000 this year. You're like, okay, that's what I have to pay.
Yeah.
And you're not going to just magically go find it on the corner, right? You have to go get that money somewhere. And everybody's in that same boat, for sure. But it kind of mirrors this idea of consumerism. Consumerism is a real common thing in America, where people take on debts because they're really just consuming. It's available. They're consuming things, whether it be the credit card or whether it be a personal loan at the bank, or you name it. There's all kinds of ways that we can go about just consuming, and hyper-consuming. Sounds like the two of you are not hyper-consumers, though. Ian
is the epitome. I feel like I live lean, and then I meet Ian, and it's like I don't think Ian's ever bought something new since I've known him. He only shops at Goodwill.
Okay.
He fixes his car himself. He goes to the junkyard and puts new doors on his car, new mirrors, new bumpers, new everything. Does the really maximal frugality that you can get. Peak frugality in medical school is Ian.
True.
Right here.
That's true.
It's also a learning experience, Like to have like a really junky car, you get to learn new jobs and how to fix it up.
Your dad was an engineer.
So
that's where this comes out.
Let me just say, Ian's car looks like a golf ball.
Yeah, it does. It absolutely does.
But it goes from point A to point B.
It does, yeah.
There you go. How's your wife feel about that?
Well, she's not driving it.
You're right.
So, yeah.
That's kind of funny. Do you think overconsumption does play a role, though, in debt and kind of the debt that even students?
I feel like students have, there's this pressure that people probably, I think just generally people probably feel of what they should look like and the image that they should have as a student or as a resident or as a doctor, and they have a realization of what that pressure is going to be in the future, and they almost go ahead and feed into it now even though they don't need to. And that's not something that I necessarily do, but I think you see a lot of classmates and people who try to create a certain picture of themselves, and typically that involves spending money to create some sort of thing, and currently that's money that none of us have. So
yeah, it sounds like you're on one end of the spectrum on that, Ian. But there's others on the other end of the spectrum when it comes to that.
I feel like there are.
Okay.
Yeah.
The kind of the people who are medical students or even residents who are already want to live like a doctor, right? And that's probably not a good idea, is it?
No.
Leads to a lot of consumption and a lot more debt. No. Yeah, so just out of curiosity for the two of you, when I use that term, live like a doctor, does anything come to your mind? Like, is that, like, you're aspiring doctors, Do either one of you like, yeah, that's what I want. I want to live like a doctor eventually, or you're like, I'm kind of against that, or where are you guys at in that spectrum?
That's interesting. I mean, I think the overall public perception of the role of a doctor is higher earning, and even if you like were to tell someone that you were going to be a doctor, in some small sense, they view you differently. And I don't particularly like that sense of social pressure that goes along with that to fit some mold of what is success and what is money. I mean, yeah, I think when I like envision the doctor, I view them driving an Audi, like a corporate car with like a nice house on a couple acres, and
would that be you?
No.
Okay.
For a number of reasons, mainly for a lot of the reasons why I went into medicine in the first place, but I do at least want a car that isn't hail damaged. That's the start.
Okay.
I don't know. Like my wife and I have a lot of conversations about that, and talking about, when we do go from living on $20,000 to residency 60 plus whatever she makes, and then on to when I become an attending, like they're drastic jumps, and so we've tried to have those conversations preemptively as to how are we going to be different, or like assuming that things are going to change, how are we controlling the way we live our lives so that we don't just fall in line with having a certain income and then feeling like we have to spend that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, I do, because that's the real thing. That's why doctors, unfortunately, aren't so good at amassing wealth, and or even kind of tracking how well they're doing with growing their net worth. They don't tend to think in those terms. They think of somewhat a consumer term. Okay. It's like an image that they want to live by. It's delayed gratification that's now pent up and played out, and it's a large paycheck that they can spend. And oftentimes they can't outspend it. So, they kind of have this idea, right, that, what, as long as I got a little left over each month in that paycheck, I must be doing okay because I got another big paycheck coming the next month. And, as long as it covers things up, I'm good. Meet my debts, live the life the way I want. I can lease that car. I can space out this car payment in such a way that I can get what I want, or that mortgage for that 2-acre house and all that sort of business, the Class A doctor's house. So how about for you, John? What, living the doctor's life? You aspire to that?
I don't know. I feel like to a certain degree, yeah. I think that it's less about I don't care so much about people's expectations of me, more about what are the things that I value and want to put my resources towards. And so if to me and my wife Cheyenne, if that means that we want to have a little bit nicer car, then that's great. Or if that means we want to have a little bit nicer house, I don't really care about cars that much. I think they lose its value as soon as you drive it off the lot. I think that's the biggest money pit you could put. So at this point in my life, I don't really care about that, but I definitely value owning property. So like owning a house would be nice, and I think anything to me, it's always should be sort of proportional to your resources. So you shouldn't be borrowing from tomorrow in order to enjoy it today. You should.
Yeah. We'll stop right there, because what you just said, that is very non-modern in terms of what a lot of doctors do. They're more than happy to borrow from tomorrow to get what they want today. And that's because lenders are very willing to give them that money. They're very low risk. Okay, you got a huge lifetime earning potential. You're very unlikely to renege on a debt or go bankrupt or not make a payment. And so they're like, hey, need this? Absolutely, you can have what you want now, but you're not saying that's how you want to do it.
I don't know. I feel like for me, I really like math, and so the math of the earning potential is interesting because it's a flat number based off the dollars that you bring in over your lifetime, but that doesn't factor in the dollars that you could have to your name if you were to invest that money over the course of your lifetime, over the course of 30 or 40 years. What's the average dollar I mean, what's the average doctor's income over the lifetime? Is it like $7 million or $10 million or something like that?
Depends on your specialty.
The average.
Okay, orthopedic surgeons make the most. But it's basically 6 to 12 million.
Yeah,
right now.
So that's like, you could look at that and be like, oh, I'm going to go ahead and get this $500,000, $800,000 house and be paying it down throughout my life. But because I know I'm going to make this amount over my lifetime, but you could also instead be putting that extra mortgage payment difference of buying a $200,000 house and be putting that into an investment to where it grows to be that your lifetime net worth could be 50, 60, 70 million.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Over the course of 40 years just from compounding. Compounding is the eighth wonder of the world. So, and I love the math, so the math motivates me.
All right, you're going to be a super saver, I can tell at some point. All right, you're going to want to make that all work, and that's good. One of the things that is that you're really both of you talked a little bit about at the end of the day is physicians want and need a sense of autonomy. Okay, a sense of control over their professional and their personal lives, and debt is a huge obstacle. So if you're watching this or listening to this, I just want you to know debt is one of the biggest obstacles you will face that will steal from your autonomy in your personal and professional life, because it acts as a slave driver, because you are chained to somebody else who controls you. And when you can loosen yourself from the chains that control you financially, you've taken a big step to emancipate yourself and allow yourself to have the autonomy to buy a car that doesn't have hail marks in it, or to buy a car that's an Audi if you are a Mercedes, or you name it, that you actually save for. Like it's not you've planned it, you've saved for it,
pay cash.
You've eliminated your debt, you paid cash, you buy it, it's all good. That's just autonomy. That's control over what you want to do. If you want to work 3 extra shifts in the ER because you know what, you got a daughter who's going to be going to college, and you're like, I just need to make a little extra money because we got some college funds to pay for. You do it. Autonomy. Okay, your decision. Not you have to work 3 extra shifts because you have a debt payment to be made. That's when you start feeling the burden of being a doctor. It's like, I have to go to work. I've got to take this shift. I've got to take this call because I've got to pay for this person. And I got to service that debt. And too many doctors, I think, fall into that trap. They don't radically choose to eliminate that debt in their lives early on. And I hear the both of you sort of talking about plans that kind of build around that. But that's the big mistake in my estimation that doctors will make, just streaming it out, and if they get their education debt cleared off, then all of a sudden it's the consumer debt. All of a sudden it's the $1 million home. That seems like the right thing. It's a great purchase. It's not going to lose money like a car will. But you know what? You're paying that bank a lot of interest for that mortgage on that loan over 20, 30 years. And so you don't quite get ahead in the game that really matters at the end, and that game is your net worth game. The net worth game. So just out of curiosity, do you know what your net worth is?
Right now?
Yeah, just out of curiosity.
Oh, not high.
Okay.
I think...
Would it be negative?
Well, I think I have more net worth than I probably give myself credit because of the fact that I made it this far in school, and I will likely make it to being a physician.
Okay, so your potential, you're talking about your potential net worth. I'm talking about your real time in today's dollars right now, your net worth. You said you got about $200,000 in debt.
Right. So yeah.
So you're
negative somewhere.
Your assets aren't $200,000 probably, right?
Yeah. No.
Okay, they might be 10 or 15 or 20,000 maybe. Okay, but you're in the negatives, right? Negative 180 approximately. And so it's just liabilities and assets in that equation, right? It's as simple as it can get when we talk about net worth. John, do you know what your net worth is?
Yes.
Okay. And are you in the positive or the negative?
I'm in the positive.
Okay, good. All right. So based on the fact you didn't have undergrad debt and your wife works, that I would expect that would probably be pretty close, and that's a good thing. So do you track that yourself?
Yep.
Okay.
I like like I said, I like the numbers. So
you're the ultra guy that's just all over it. Okay.
I think just being married, I think we just are on
And
top of
to
our
accountant.
finances.
Yeah.
We're on top of our finances together. I got the spreadsheet queen, and so
And two
Every-
students, though, don't want to think about their negative net worth, right?
Yeah, I mean, I
That'd be
am not
miserable to think
a
about
numbers
it.
guy. I do not really keep track of it. To some
Yeah.
extent, I tell myself that it's going to be okay. And then
Yeah,
just-
yep.
Yep.
You know what?
think about it.
That's what most physicians in training do.
Yeah.
That's their kind of MO. Like, it's
I feel
gonna
like
be
especially
okay.
when especially if it's far negative, it's just kind of like who wants to look at that,
Who wants to look at a negative number?
Considering
Remember,
more variables is just going to stress me out. And I feel like if I just live frugal right now, then that's about what I can do.
Mm-hmm.
That's what at least
control
that's how
you
I
can
feel.
control at this point.
But a lot of micromanagement you can do in this equation. But at the end of the day, when you have an awareness that your debt's eliminated, that's a big step in your life, right? And that is a little bit sort of offset by that net worth equation too. So when your net worth hits zero, if you're in the negatives, that's the day to celebrate. That's the day to take your wife out to eat, right? Because it's like, you know what, honey, this train is moving in the right direction, and we're going to just keep getting positive and positive and positive and positive. As John said, compounding being your friend, that can really move forward faster, and the sooner you get rid of debt out of that equation, then it really accelerates, right? Assuming you're managing the consumption piece. And so that net worth really is an important part, though, of that autonomy. Okay, is at the end of the day, if for John, I think I know this a little bit about you. I don't know if you've told our listeners this, but I don't think you want to work in medicine all of your life, all of your career.
No.
Why? Tell me more about that. Like, what's
I feel like I have a lot of interests outside of medicine, and I'm a passionate person. I like to just be diverse and have my hand in a couple different pots and keep things interesting. So who knows where I'll be at in 10 or 15 years, 20 years, but I would expect that maybe I only want to work part-time. I want to work half the week, and the other half of the week I want to have some other side hobby that I do, or some other side job, or maybe volunteer. Maybe I find some other thing that I'm passionate about and care about. I think the freedom that you can get from autonomy financially allows you to do a lot of other things, and so I think that there's a lot of other ways I can do good in the world outside of just medicine, and I think I have the skills to do some of those good things, and
Nice.
I'd like to have the freedom to do those things.
Okay. Well, what does net worth have to do with any of that then? Why do you keep track of your net worth? Does it have anything to do with that?
Yeah, I think it's important for you to have an idea in your mind of what amount of assets would allow you to no longer need to work. And that gives you the freedom from an employer or a job. It doesn't mean you have to stop working,
Right.
but it's like your financial freedom number. You could stop working if you wanted. You could do less hours if you wanted. You can work more hours. You can do whatever you want. That's the point. You can do whatever you want whenever you want, because you're not beholden to your future expenses as well. You've not only defeated your current debts, but you're no longer beholden to any future expenses because you have prepared and planned and stored away to take care of those things.
Yeah, that's autonomy again, right? We come back to that sort of sense that you get to control your destiny. You get to decide how that looks and plays out in the ideal sense at any moment, at any year, at any time that you want to. And that's a pretty powerful notion, isn't it? But I can see how those two things are linked together. Net worth, knowing what that is, and that sense of having greater control and autonomy because you know where you're at in space to be able to control that. They really do go hand in hand. That's been a more recent epiphany for me, listeners. I didn't know this myself for a long time. That's one of the reasons I bring it up. I was the mindset of, I'm making a lot of money. I'm sure I'll be okay. It's all going to work out. Gosh, how could it not when I make this much money? But I didn't have the forethought to think through that in a sense of where am I at in space? How much do I have, and is it enough? And now I know that it's enough that I have. So it really changes my psyche. I feel better. I feel less of a burden. I do still feel freedom that comes from, I don't have to go to work. I do because I love it. I love what I do. And I've always said to my wife, as long as I love doing this every day still, I'm going to keep doing it for a while. And when the day comes and I'm like, this is really getting to be a drag, that's when I might think about, I'm going to make some changes. And but I can. The point is, I can. And that's a much different state of mind and a much better place, I think, that physicians don't think about because of debt. Okay, so a couple other subjects just to bring out here. Debt avalanche and debt snowball. You guys heard those terms before?
Yep.
Debt avalanche and debt snowball. I think, Ian, you told me before you'd heard of the debt snowball from...
Yep.
How do you know about debt snowball and all that business?
Well, I had been familiarized with Dave Ramsey for a bit.
Yeah, a lot of people are.
So yeah, I'd heard of the snowball. I don't know anything about the avalanche though.
Yeah. So in essence, the debt snowball, right, is that you kind of radically put all of your effort into taking care of your debts, and in Ramsey's sort of debt snowball, traditionally, you basically make minimum payments on all your debts that you have to make, okay, so that they don't continue to spiral out of control. But then what you do is you make extra payments on the smallest loan. And from a psychological behavioral standpoint, as you get rid of loans one at a time, you begin to develop this mindset of, one down, I'm going to pick off another one. Another one down, I'm going to pick off another one. And you keep psychologically, and at the end of the day, you're behaviorally altering your views of finances, right? And that's why it's called the debt snowball, right? Because it builds and it builds and it builds. And in the middle of that, Ramsey talks about not having credit cards and some other things, so you can't continue to build consumer debt while you're paying off another one. Like, there's things that you have to do to radically not allow yourself to regain debt. And so that's the debt snowball. The debt avalanche is a little bit different from the standpoint of...
It's all about the math.
It is. It's all about the math. It's all about making the extra payments on your highest interest loan, because that's the person that you're really paying the most extra money for that loan. And so when you do the really, and math geeks like you, John, probably like the avalanche a little bit better. Yeah. And others might like the snowball a little better. I'm not here to say one's better than the other, but there's pluses and minuses to both. And at the end of the day, though...
You're paying off your debts.
You're paying the debt off. Okay, and you can go about that a lot of different ways. There are a lot of nuances associated with paying off education debt, though. There's a lot of things that kind of can go into that. And I always encourage folks to not try and go solo on that. Get a financial advisor, a financial planner, somebody who knows what they're doing in that subject matter to help you know how to best organize and work out a strategy and a plan for that. For some people, that strategy is you're going to do some forgiveness plan with the federal government. Some it's going to be you sign an attending position where they pay it off. And there's all kinds of strategies involved. Some convert it to private loans even too. So there's just all sorts of ways. And I think everybody